Good morning and welcome back. I hope you had a good coffee break. If you're just tuning in right now or joining us in the room, my name is Jan Chański and I'm a senior policy editor at POLITICO. And welcome to our spotlight discussion, and the title is The Outlook on Alternative Fuels. If you're waiting for a session with passion and fireworks, I'm hoping that this is the one. Sustainable fuels have been one of the most inflammatory political topics in the EU. Part of this year's campaign for the European election was driven by whether sustainable fuels should have a role in road transport after 2035. It's also really crucial for the future of aviation and shipping. The fuels also spark intense controversy over their cost, their availability, the green credentials, and what sectors they should be used for. You all look like you are frequent panel attendees, and I know that I lead a lot of them, and the worst thing is if you have panel guests who agree with each other and you've got somebody says something and the next person says, I have nothing to add because the previous person said everything that I was going to say, but I'll say it to you again and iterate. And I'm really hoping, and I don't think that that's going to happen for this panel. I think we're going to have some vivid disagreements, which is more fun for the participants and for the watchers. There's a few changes in programming before we get started. Raluca Marian, who is going to have some remarks, was supposed to speak before this panel got going, but she will speak later, and hopefully I'll let you know exactly when she'll be speaking sometime during the panel. We've also got a few changes to the actual makeup of the panel. Unfortunately, Eduardo Turano, with DG Klima, won't be able to join us, and Julia Poliskanova, the director for vehicles and e-mobility at TNE, will not be here, and instead she's being replaced by Laura Buffett, who is the Director of Energy at Transport and Environment. I'd also like to introduce Liana Gutta, who's the Director General for Fuels Europe, and Claudia Stutz, who's the Head of Directorate G2, Climate Change Mitigation in the Mobility Sector, Environmental Protection at the German Federal Ministry for Digital and Transport. So thank you very much and welcome to the panel. I'd like to begin with, we probably all are aware of the general world of alternative fuels, but maybe if we could give a quick run through what are the main categories of alternative fuels with a little rundown of their pluses and minuses. So maybe, Laura, if you could start the big 3 or 4 that everybody should be aware of and the positives and negatives around them.
Sure. First, good morning, everyone. Maybe first, let's say that TNE has been working on alternative fuels for more than 15 years now, so we have quite a lot of expertise on the topic. And we look at this topic while keeping in mind our mission, which is to ensure that the transport sector becomes zero emission, is affordable to people, and has minimal impacts on climate and the environment. I think it's important to keep that in mind. So then in terms of major categories of fuels, we can start first with biofuels. This is an area that we've been working in for many years again. I would say that currently most biofuels in Europe and globally are produced from food crops, so things like palm oil or soy, and they have very negative impacts on the climate, on biodiversity, and they also have impacts on food security. That's why we really do not consider these fuels as sustainable. Then you have biofuels produced from waste and residues, and here some of them can play a role in decarbonizing transport. Here we're talking about things like used cooking oil, or animal fats, or forestry residues, but we need to be careful because not all of them are sustainable, and they're also very difficult to scale up. So what we see is that there's just not enough available biomass for producing biofuels at the right scale. And if you take into account all the sustainable biomass available in Europe, that would enable us to meet only up to 13% of jet fuel demand by 2030, which is clearly not enough and won't be enough to decarbonize the entire transport sector. So that's it for biofuels, I would say, but happy to dive more into details later on. We also have other categories of fuels produced from renewable hydrogen. So you can either use renewable hydrogen directly into fuel cell electric vehicles, for example, or in other applications like in shipping. And here, it's not the best efficient use of electricity. It's always better to use electricity directly. And so that's why we consider that renewable hydrogen and e-fuels that derive from renewable hydrogen have a better role to play in aviation and shipping. If we talk about e-fuels specifically, so these are the fuels produced from renewable hydrogen with CO2 sources. The issue with these fuels is that they are first very, very expensive. They're very inefficient in terms of the electricity use, and they're also polluting. So for all these reasons, we know that there's a lot of talks about adding e-fuels in car CO2 regulation, but we do oppose that because they're just not the right solution for cars. EVs are much better, cleaner, most affordable to EU drivers, and that's why we should not consider e-fuels in the car CO2 regulation. I think I've done the overview more generally, but happy to say more about some of these categories later on.
Great, thank you very much. Eliana, what's your take on the big three when it comes to alternative fuels, and what's your take as well on how their uses and whether they do in fact meet some of the criteria that the EU has set out?
Yes. Thank you very much. And let me clarify that I represent the European Fuel Manufacturers Association, which means our members produce our current fuels covering 95% of everything of the energy that moves people and goods. And all our members have been hugely investing in all technologies for the carbonization of transport, the entire transport, and of course road transport as well. We are big investors in electromobility as well, with large recharging networks across Europe. And of course, we have been investing in the transformation of our core business of the production of fuels. And we are focusing on all kind of renewable fuels, biofuels, and we are talking about a second generation, advanced biofuels. We're not producing first generation biofuels, and we believe that these biofuels will only be in the market for a few years because they have some challenges. But even though currently even the first generation biofuels in Europe comply with the ILUC directive, so they address all sustainability issues. But our sector is not involved in this business apart from delivering, mixing and delivering. As far as it concerns our production, we have been investing in renewable fuels, both advanced biofuels, and we will invest also in e-fuels. So if we want to compare, I wouldn't say we should compare fuels. I would say that we should compare the carbonization technologies for road transport. And let me start with electromobility. Great technology. It will play a major role in the decarbonization of road transport, no doubt. But there are some objective facts regarding electromobility. We need a new fleet. We have challenges regarding the recharging points and the consumer's behavior and the consumer's experience. We need to build a new infrastructure network covering every corner in Europe. Let's say a similar network with all refueling stations that we have currently in Europe, reaching every single village, supplying the fuels that we need. There are challenges related to electromobility regarding dependencies, new dependencies, we all know very well. And of course, the car industry, which is a very competitive and innovative car industry in Europe, has to be supported to transform in order to produce electric vehicles. And also, we need to build a new battery industry in Europe. Coming to biofuels now, regarding, first of all, let me start with e-fuels. E-fuels do not exist in the market now. They will exist in a few years, and as I told you, our companies, our members are investing in this. They have many advantages because they are drop-in fuel, so they can be used in existing fleets, no need for a new fleet, no need for a new infrastructure, storage, delivery, and supply. They are indeed very expensive, but which is the new technology which is not more expensive than the current technology is used? It was the same with solar panels, with wind turbines, with electric cars, with batteries. So indeed, there is a big challenge regarding their cost, and they also have to address the challenge of the abundance of green hydrogen that will be needed in order to produce e-fuels. Coming now to the last third option, these of the advanced biofuels, there we can find all the advantages regarding the ease of use because, as I told you, we don't need new fleets. Either these are cars or airplanes or maritime. They can use across the entire transport sector. No need for new infrastructure. Regarding availability, well, I have to say that I don't agree with Laura because according to our studies, the studies that we have seen from Imperial College, from TNO, and lately 2 months ago, a study for the Commission for DG RTD, they all give similar results showing that there is available biomass and agricultural residues, forestry residues, and other waste materials that can support the production of advanced biofuels, not only for aviation and shipping, but also for an important share of the road transport. As far as it concerns their availability in the market, let me tell you that there are already more than 6,000 refueling stations in Europe supplying 100% renewable advanced biofuels. And in some countries, they come even at a lower cost. In Spain, you can find it 10 cents lower than the cost of a conventional fuel. And of course, something very important that we need to bring to the table in the public debate is that if we compare all fuels technology, we will see regarding the dependencies that they create, we will see, for example, that for electromobility, we have dependencies on some critical raw materials that non-European countries produce. For example, graphite. 70% of its production comes from China, and 100% of the graphite is refined in China. So there is no graphite in Europe. Regarding crude oil, the fuels that we currently use, there are, I would say, 2 countries in Europe producing crude oil. When we come to advanced biofuels, every single country in the EU can produce its own sustainable biomass in order to support the production of advanced biofuels, which means that brings us closer to some kind of strategic autonomy, while it also supports circular economy targets, and creates a new, I would say, a new decentralized energy production model, creating new value chains and supporting local economies. So we believe that there are many advantages for the advanced biofuels that they are already in the market, and we really don't see any reason why they should be excluded from the decarbonization of road transport. We really believe that all technologies should be given the option to develop, to come to the market. The policymakers have to set the targets, they have to set the ambition, and also the rules for a level playing field of all new technologies, but they should leave the market to decide, the consumers to decide. All technology should compete in the market, and also we should let scientists to tell us what is the benefit from each technology, not only comparing the CO2 reduction that each technology can achieve over its life cycle analysis. This is extremely important, as the representative of Renault highlighted earlier. And also taking into account on a scientific basis all these new criteria regarding dependency, circularity, and so on.
That sounds, you're painting quite a positive picture. I'm going to ask Laura for her view on whether she thinks that's realistic or not in a second. But I'd like to ask Claudia, what's the German government's position? It's been quite a febrile issue in Germany, the pressure to add e-fuels to the 2035 CO2 emitting car phase out under EU rules. What's the government's position on that?
Thank you, and hello to everyone. Well, first of all, I would say, above all, is our climate goals. And this morning there was this discussion, mission impossible or possible, and I want to underline that in our opinion, the most important thing is that we achieve our climate goals, and it has to be a mission possible and nothing impossible. And at the same time, we do know that a focus has to be set on the electrification on vehicles. That's for sure. So for Germany, I can say we do have a focus on the electrification. Our biggest funding program with 2.3 billion euros is to have an overall charging infrastructure, not only for cars, but now coming up also with the infrastructure for heavy commercial vehicles. So all this is very cost intensive, but we are convinced that this is the main road we have to go, because we also know that the majority of the greenhouse gas emissions come from the road sector. So of course we have to focus on this.
So the long-term direction of travel is the destination is electric, basically, from the point of view of the government.
Well, yes, let's say the focus, it is the focus, and we want, our aim is to have 15 million electric vehicles by 2030, and that's why we have this really great funding program. But at the same time, we see that we do need a reality check. Let's see, at least for shipping over long distances, also for the aviation, there will be no electrification in the near future. And still, also in these transport sectors, we have to fit our goals. And that's where we come into the discussion of renewable fuels. I really want to clarify that we focus on this topic of renewable fuels. And then we have to take into consideration how do we get there? And we see the struggle also in the industry, although we are subsidizing a lot of projects, that there's not a really market ramp. And so I think it is necessary, not only for the German government, but for all of us in Europe, to find good solutions. How can we, for example, use then renewable fuels or byproducts of renewable fuels so that it is, also in a commercial sense, all of it makes sense. Because, and this is the last thing I would like to underline, it's probably also not only in Germany a big discussion about the budgetary restrictions. We are subsidizing a lot, but we all know about the situation in the member states, and we do have to find solutions and paths also with the industry and with more solutions also besides of subsidies.
So you mentioned shipping and aviation, which I think there's broad agreement that is certainly those are certainly areas where alternative fuels have a future. Does the same apply to road transport? Is there do you see, or does the government have a vision of tweaking the rules to allow for sort of longer-term use of alternative fuels?
Well, let's say it's not a secret that our ministry is convinced that for a foreseeable future, we do need combustion engines as a drivetrain mix, and therefore, yes, this was also the reason why we had the discussion with the European Commission to allow combustion engines which are powered by carbon neutral fuels, and this also beyond 2035. Right.
Laura, you've heard a fair bit about the various ideas out there. What's your assessment of where that comes in terms of environmental impact and realism?
Sure. Well, first, I mean, you wanted us to disagree to have a panel that is more fun, and I think I will disagree with many things that have been said before. I guess I will spend a bit more time on e-fuels versus EVs. So as I said, e-fuels are very expensive, and to make it more concrete, if you look at the total cost of ownership over 5 years, a car driver running on e-fuels would pay 10,000 euros more than running on an EV. So I think, we're facing a situation in Europe where people are already struggling with the cost of living, etc. Can you imagine that you will tell them, okay, this is the path that we're taking for you. You cannot really decide because that's being decided in Brussels. And that's the cost they will have to take. So I think that's really important to take that into account. The second point I flagged is that they're very inefficient. And again, to make it more clear, if you run a car on e-petrol by 2030, you will need 5 times more electricity than running an EV. We know that the electricity system will be under pressure by a lot of additional demand from heat pumps and a lot of needs for electrification all over the economy. So how can we be realistic about an energy system that will have to deal with these extra demands if we do e-fuels in cars? And finally, they're also polluting because they emit as much NOx emissions as cars powered by fossil fuels. So again, in terms of air quality and the way of life in cities, that's not going to help us. So for all these reasons, we think these fuels will have a role to play again, but that's really for sectors that have no other options, like it has been said before, which is aviation and shipping mostly. Then on biofuels, I would like to come back also to some of the things that have been said. We have different numbers, and I think it's not the first time that we have different numbers on many things with the industry representatives, so that's not really a surprise. Here I would also take a very concrete example, used cooking oil. This is something that we've been hearing about for many years, and even as TNE, we think that yes, if you have used cooking oil available from your fries, we're in Belgium, so you know what I'm talking about, then you can use it, transform it into a fuel, and that makes sense. If you cannot do anything with it, let's do that. And if you can source it in Europe, trace your supply chain, make sure that there's no fraud, great. But what we've seen is not that. What we've seen is that Europe has increased its import dependency because of the UCO rush. So contrary to the point you were making about decreasing our import dependencies, we're actually increasing imports for new biofuels. So now EU countries are using 8 times more used cooking oil than they collect. We import 60% of UCO from China. There's huge risks about fraud and investigations going on. So, we wanted to be hopeful about advanced biofuels. We started on this topic 10 years ago or more, and we discussed with the advanced biofuels industry. We tried to see what would be possible. And again, we think some of them can play a role, but it's just never going to be enough for decarbonizing transport. So I think the reality check is there. We've been working on this for many years, and unfortunately, there's just not a miracle solution that will help us solve the climate issue for transport. So here again, that's why we think that you need investment certainty for the industry. You need to be clear about the direction of travel that the car sector needs to take. And if you start diluting the rules with alternative fuels, then you're just undermining the investment certainty for car makers, battery makers, charge point operators, because they just won't know where they have to go anymore. And I think that's a threat that we need to avoid.
We've certainly seen divisions within the car industry with some manufacturers arguing for a change in the rules and allowing for e-fuels, and other ones saying that we're on track for electrification. We don't want to have, as you said, mixed signals coming through.
It's clear that there's different voices, and we're not saying that going to electromobility is going to come with no challenges. Of course, there will be challenges, but I think that what we've seen in the past is a very rapid acceleration of investments, of new technologies on the market that we hadn't seen before. So I think we can also be hopeful that with the regulations in place, with, for example, the infrastructure regulation at EU level, we will have the correct setup in place for electromobility going forward. But again, yes, we acknowledge that there are different voices in the debate. I think what our role is again, to make sure that we choose the path that is the most affordable to people, but also the cleanest in terms of air quality and climate. And it's clear that for cars, this is EVs. But then for aviation and shipping, as I said, we can discuss about biofuels and e-fuels.
Liana, because you focused quite strongly in your opening comment on biofuels. Do you have the same view on e-fuels? Do you see that as an alternative that should be explored for road transport as well?
We believe that all technologies should be explored in all transport sector. We believe that we have seen the results of a single choice that Europe has made through its legislation regarding road transport by selecting and promoting only electromobility. We can see the results of this political decision every day on the media regarding the news on the car industry and also on the nascent battery industry lately with Northvolt. I believe that this gives us, as Claudia said, a reality check of what is going on. And we cannot ignore anymore the reluctance of consumers to embark on this full electromobility vision. We cannot ignore competitiveness issues. You cannot ignore new dependencies issues. And now it is time to react, and we believe that Europe needs to show flexibility and a swift response in order to take into account this reality check together with all these other challenges that I mentioned. And Europe needs to take the learnings and the lessons that we should learn from this reality check, also from the new circumstances after the pandemic and the energy crisis, the proposals of Letta and Draghi report. And what we should do, we believe that we should open the doors to all technologies. We should break down silos, because currently there are silos regarding technologies used in various transport segments, and we need to leave the market to decide. I would like to comment on a few things that you mentioned before. First of all, let's not focus, as I said, on e-fuels, because e-fuels are not in the market yet. They will come in the market, and they will be an important technology. Regarding biofuels, you mentioned used cooking oils, but this is the HVO technology. There is also the technology of lignocellulosic advanced biofuels, complying with RED directive, which is the next step, let's say, in advanced biofuels, which will be supported by residual biomass from agriculture and forestry and waste material. And I really cannot understand this argument saying that there is not enough biomass, so we should exclude this technology. No one said that this technology should support the decarbonization of the entire road transport. On the contrary, this will be a complementary technology supporting electromobility and decarbonization of road transport. And we should, I believe that under the circumstances now, we should go back to science and focus on what is our ultimate goal. Our ultimate goal is to reduce CO2 emissions. And we need science to calculate these CO2 emissions over a life cycle analysis. And if we want to be frank, currently there is no electric vehicle on the roads that is carbon neutral. They have their emissions during their manufacturing and their disposal phase, but they also have the emissions because of the electricity production, the electricity that is used in electric vehicles. But we fully support, and we believe that each technology needs to have this transitional phase and needs to have this support in order to come to the market at scale and to have the option of a development at scale and the cost reduction. And that happened with electromobility, because electromobility was very expensive a few years ago. It still is expensive for European consumers, but we need to create the enabling conditions for all new technologies.
So you think that the same pattern will be replicated for alternative fuels?
Yeah, it should be replicated for e-fuels that, of course, are expensive right now, and for the biofuels as well, which, as I said, is a more mature technology, is closer to the market, and can support a smoother transition, and also a fair transition, I would say, for all European citizens, because all European citizens can be part of the decarbonization by using advanced biofuels to the extent that they can afford. So they will not be left behind, but they can use their existing car to reduce their CO2 emissions.
Great, thanks. Claudia, the Commission is supposed to take another look at the 2035 rule. What is the German government's position on how the 2035 mandate should be changed?
Well, I think it is not a discussion on change, but it's the discussion on how can we reach really our climate goals. And oftentimes we do have this discussion, which technology has which advantage, which is better or not. And I would say it's not really a discussion about which is the better one or not. In the end, we need all of it. I think this is the challenge, that we do need to focus on electric vehicles for the road transport. We do need other options, so of course, hydrogen, the cell technology, also about renewable fuels, especially for the aviation, and that's what we are concerned about.
But so do you take what Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has been saying? I mean, do you see that her willingness to look again at 2035, are you seeing that as a positive? And there's also the pressure from the European People's Party to move up the review period, and there's also some voices that there should be a deeper rethink of the whole 2035 mandate.
Well, I think that the European Commission did also recently a lot of important things. So when we talk about the Renewable Energy Directive, which makes really clear there is a focus on even more climate protection, and at the same time there is a focus on renewable energy. And of course there the transport sector has an important role. But yes, I can admit in some ways when it comes to the criteria, we would have wished that parts of it would not be as strict as it is, just to get faster to the ramp-up phase.
I'd like to ask Laura and Liana as well. What's your view of of the Commission's approach now to the 2035 mandate? Do you think they're tracking in the right direction, or
who should start? I mean, as I said, for us, we don't see the point of reopening the decision.
There's a lot of political pressure to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we acknowledge that,
Right.
and it's clear that from EPP and other sides, there's a lot of pressure to reopen it. I would say that if there is a derogation for fuels in the car regulation, which is not what we want, what we think would be maybe the only acceptable option is to have e-fuels only and 100% e-fuels only, and fully carbon neutral, and no biofuels. I think that's the minimum that we would ask if there is a derogation. Because if you do not have the requirement of 100% e-fuel, that means that you could still blend biofuels or e-fuels with oil, and then you're not solving the climate issue at all. Like, you're not talking about zero-emission vehicles. You're just, talking about a solution that is not going to help to fight climate change. So that's why, we would not want to reopen it. But if it's reopened, and if there is a loophole, then that should be as small as possible.
What's your view on the derogation, on how wide it should, if it happens, how wide the scope should be?
Well, we believe that this is an opportunity to bring the review close earlier, as there is a request from various parties. And also we believe that we need to revisit the IC ban, or I would say, as I said and as I explained, we don't want to revisit the ambition and the targets. These are there, and we should find the way to achieve them. But the pathway should be not a single technology chosen by the politicians. The pathway should be chosen by the industry and the market. And
but don't politicians have a role? I mean, this is an environment where regulation plays a fairly key is a key factor. So it's not an entirely free market. I mean, a lot of this is happening because of regulation, right?
Yes, exactly. And this is what I believe should change, because the politicians should not impose single technologies in the market, but should set the rules for fair competition and for a level playing field for all technologies to compete. And then the market and the consumers should find a way and should decide. Regarding investments, I would like to say a few words, if I have the time, because we often hear that we should direct renewable fuels only to aviation and maritime. We should keep in mind that for us, for the investors, because we are the investors who should deliver these renewable fuels that Europe will need for aviation and maritime sector, it is very important to have a business case. And in the case that we only have to produce fuels for aviation and maritime, then we will not have a clear business case, and we will also have technical hurdles and restrictions, because there is no refinery, no biorefinery, no Fisher and Drop unit that can produce only jet fuels or only maritime. They
so
produce always
a
mix of products, and all these products have to find their way to the market. So it is very important to have this opportunity, otherwise investments will be redirected in other areas of the world, or the cost of the entire investment will come to the aviation or maritime fuels.
Great, thanks. My final question, as our seconds tick down, I'd like to ask Claudia, what's the German car industry is undergoing a crisis. Is there a sense in Berlin that tweaking these rules could help the car sector during this transition period?
Well, yes, I think, of course, it's also, on the one hand side, the political framework, yes, but it's also a lot of to-dos for the industries themselves. That's also something I think we do have to underline when we talk about e-fuels, for example, is that we are looking forward to proposals how to have tamper-proof e-fuels operations. So it's not only the framework makers who are in charge, but also the industry itself.
Great, thank you very much. Unfortunately, I'm afraid that our time has come to an end for this panel, so thanks again for taking part. And I would like to invite Raluca Marian, who is the Director of EU Advocacy and General Delegate of the IRU, to make a couple of remarks. And after she is finished, we will get our aviation reporter, Tommaso Lecco, will moderate the spotlight discussion, A Ticket for a Greener Future, Sustainable Fuels for Airplanes. Thank you.
Talking in my zip at night, making myself crazy.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Is the microphone working? Yes, now it's working. I'm supposed to give the closing remarks to this session, which is called The Outlook on Sustainable Fuels, but I like very much the title of the next session, which is A Ticket to the Greener Future, and not only for aviation, but also for road transport. So I'm representing the heavy-duty sector, so the commercial road sector. This means trucks, buses, and coaches. And I think it's very important by noting a very obvious, otherwise, difference, which is a truck is not a car, or a coach is not a car. So when it comes to decarbonization, there is a fundamental distinction. And in order to understand this distinction, it's also important to note some facts and figures. So we are talking about approximately 7 million heavy-duty vehicles, and we are also talking about 5 million jobs, and about the fact that we have around about 1 million transport operators, and 89% of these transport operators have below 10 employees. So it's a sector which is dominated by small enterprises. Now, also because we are talking about what kind of alternative fuels we foresee in the future and we see for our sector as being the future and green future, it's important to know that these vehicles, we call them, we see them on the roads, we see coaches, we see trucks, but they do very different things. We call them mission profiles. So like mission profiles for trucks, they can do from transporting flowers to transporting chemical substances. They have deliveries to the cities, and they have deliveries of food products from the southern Europe to the northern Europe on corridors. So short distance, long distance. So very, very different things they are doing. And because they are doing so many different things, our sector is calling for options. And what do we call? What are these options? And I was very happy to hear the representative of the German government saying that combustion is necessary and will continue in the heavy-duty sector, because definitely we will talk about a mixture of solutions, and there will be, and there are already zero-emission vehicles in the sense of electric battery. There will be more hydrogen vehicles, but also we are calling for whatever we call them, carbon-neutral fuels, can be lower carbon fuels, advanced renewable fuels, whatever names we give to these fuels. But for us, these are called options and the possibility to continue our very diverse operations. And also because we are talking about how to incentivize our sector is very complicated at the moment, because we see an inconsistency in the policy. On the one hand side, we see in the renewable fuels legislation that manufacturers are supposed to produce more of them. And on the other hand side, when we look at the taxation policy, we see a clear focus in our sector. If we take the Eurovignette, energy taxation, I'm not even talking about that anymore because it hasn't been changed in years and is totally locked at the moment in the Council. But the focus at the moment on taxation is on incentives only for zero-emission tailpipe, which means only electric vehicles. So it's quite complicated to incentivize the immediate decarbonization of the sector when there is such an inconsistency in the way the sector is incentivized to use more of these greener solutions. So we have the example in Italy, HVOs. Okay, perhaps they are not the ideal, but they offer an immediate possibility to decrease the carbon emissions. HVOs are subsidized, but not in Germany. So if we do a transport from Italy to Sweden, what is the consistency of approach of member states? So this also brings us, of course, because why this happens, it also brings us to this concept of myth. And we heard from Fuels Europe in the previous panel. We heard that often this sector, the fuels producers, are confronted with this kind of bias. There won't be enough. There won't be enough. This idea of lack. There won't be enough for aviation if the road also takes this kind of better fuels. They should be reserved for someone. This is a question Fuels Europe can reply to. I have another thing. Our sector, meaning heavy-duty vehicles, should only go for electricity and for hydrogen because it's so easy. It's already there. They are ready for that. And I'm here to say we are not ready for. Who is ready for that? Where is the infrastructure? Do you know that if, even in Brussels, not to talk about the whole Europe, in Brussels, the whole fleet of buses of Brussels becomes electric tomorrow, we perhaps have electricity problems in this room? Where is the grid? Before we talk about revisions and deadlines, and who has a perfect mapping of the grid in Europe? Is Europe ready for that? And we are talking, and I'm going to end with that, we are talking now, we hear more and more this pressure coming on our sector, on the car sector, greening of corporate fleets, mandatory purchasing mandates for transport operators or for car owners to have a certain percentage of their fleet electric. So we are talking about sticks when we have no carrots. We are talking about obliging, about intervention in a market economy when nobody can demonstrate that the conditions for the transition are there. Do we have the grid? Do we have the infrastructure? Today, now? We may have it in 2030, 2035. Then why are we talking now about a planned economy? Why are we talking now about forcing operators and car owners to do something when the conditions are not there now? Just based on hopes and without even having the plan for the grid? So just to sum up, happy to hear the different views, happy that a revision is ahead, and I'm sure it will be ahead, because we all want to decarbonize, and then we heard from Germany, our mission is to decarbonize and to be carbon neutral. But how we do it, by when we do it, has to be well thought through, because we are not playing with experiments here. And especially here, we are talking about a sector serving the economy. So we have to make sure that all the little puzzles, pieces are in place, and then decide and make policy. Thank you very much.